This session, Calibrations and QA Audits, is a three-part presentation. Part 1 is Calibration Certifications, a standards laboratory perspective presented by Louise Sorensen of the California Air Resources Board. Part 2 is some brief points on a gas analyzer calibration, presented by Chris Wills of the Mojave Desert AQMD. And Part 3 is an overview presented by Hansa Romanek of the California Air Resources Board.
Hi, I am Louise Sorensen from CARB. This presentation is a very brief overview of duties performed by the Standards Laboratory when you submit your calibration unit for certification. This is where it all starts. If you need to calibrate your analyzer, your calibrator unit referred to as a working standard must first visit the Standards Laboratory. The working standard is then certified against a higher standard. A comparison test is done in the laboratory. We do not do any adjustments, maintenance, or repairs in the laboratory. The working standard must visit the lab for regular verification, but also if it is new, been adjusted, or been repaired. It is a good practice to close out the working standard prior to any repairs or maintenance. This means we in the laboratory will run one comparison test to ensure the equipment is still in control. The equipment inside the red rectangle is the SRP, which stands for Standards Reference Photometer. The Standards Laboratory conducts a comparison to the SRP and issues a certification report if the working standard passes. This is an example of a certification being performed on two working standards. Depending on how the equipment is used in the field would depend on the number of cycles tested. Each cycle consists of 8 points. A comparison can take anywhere from 1 day to 6 days. Here are the current passing criteria to pay attention to on the data summary page of the certificate. Once the working standard passes verification, you're ready to perform certifications on your analyzers in the field. If you have any questions, let me know and I'll be glad to answer them either via email or during the question portion of this presentation.
Hello, this is Chris Wills from Mojave Desert AQMD, and this presentation is a very brief overview of gas analyzer calibration, and it also serves as a lead-in for the Audits versus Calibrations presentation. I recently gave a much longer and more detailed version of this, which is entitled Ozone Calibration. There's more to it, so if you would like, you may refer back to that presentation as well. So let's get started. If it gets calibrated, it gets audited. Obviously, the gas analyzers themselves go through the calibration audit cycle, as well as the particulate and the MET systems. We also can't forget the equipment used to complete calibrations and verifications. These include thermometers, flow meters, and the like. These units should also have the appropriate certification reports provided by either the manufacturer or the CARB lab. Calibration of the nightly QC challenging unit should also be on hand and up to date. The sample train, tubing, and manifold themselves are also suspect during the calibration and audit process. This presentation is primarily focused on the gas analyzer, but it's worth noting the other equipment. Calibration, the comparison of two measurement values derived by a device under test against another of known accuracy. In the air monitoring world, we utilize calibration in terms of as found and as left. As found is the verification that requires no adjustment and the unit can be left in its current state. As left is when an adjustment is required in either the form of a zero adjustment or a span adjustment. This slide goes further to describe the when and when not to calibrate. Also note adjustments are made in accordance to your current SOPs and protocols. CARB also likes to call as found the as is and as left the final calibration. Setting up the calibrator tubing. Going through the inlet is the ideal method because you capture the effects or influence from a greater portion of your sample path. Also, CARB states that they see less audit failures with this setup. Connecting at the manifold is also acceptable, but it covers less of the sample path. And from the back of the instrument is also possible if you do not want to shut down sampling from the other analyzers. This method I have seen used the least. The CFR states to use the most practicable scenario available. Standards used. The Teledyne series is used quite regularly. The T700U calibrates by means of mass flow controllers, and when equipped with the photometer and ozone generator, it is dual purpose for ozone as well. The T703 is an ozone-only gas calibrator version. With the use of NumaView software, you can now adjust back pressure compensations to the flow rate of your calibration. Previously, it was set only at 5 liters per minute. Finally, the zero error generator. This is the big factor of your calibration. The dew point can cause issues, and I have specifically noticed it with CO and ozone, and I'm pretty sure it doesn't stop there. A solid and stable zero will play out in your calibration, but determining a good zag is still up for debate. Currently, comparison methods seem to be the primary choice to distinguish a good functioning zag. Comparing one unit against another or against an ultra-pure bottle, or swapping zag units from one location to another to see if the nightly QC is affected are some possibilities. The calibration data. This is an example of an ozone calibration minute data. As you can see, we start out with ambient roughly at 60 parts per billion. Then we run zero and the graph moves downward. Next, we initiate the back pressure compensation, which uses 0, and 3 back pressure compensations follow. The peaks represent the time between back pressure compensation where the ambient air is being drawn in. As you can see, it took 3 tries before I felt comfortable moving forward. Take note of the time comparison between the prep time and the running of the actual calibration points. The criteria. Here's an example of the 2% calibration criteria. This is a portion of our in-house calibration report for ozone. We have the percent error at each set point, which is not to exceed 5%, but for the low point, the 1.5 ppb is also acceptable. If we are within the 5%, no span is necessary. The bottom is the best fit line graph with the 2.1% error from best fit line. If there's any point that fails the best fit line, the span is necessary and the process is then repeated. Sometimes the calibration, though, just draws more questions than answers, and sometimes an underlying problem needs answering. In my previous presentation, I detailed 3 scenarios we had encountered where calibration would not fix the situation or would not work properly. You can refer back to them. They include an ash buildup, a scrubber bias scenario, and problems with back pressure concerns. But to expose such problems, you require documentation. Your calibration should be noted in the logbooks as well as the calibration report. Maintain good records and documentation practices. Give enough information to be able to repeat the process. Good documentation will help answer questions in the future, and these records will help diagnose scenarios as mentioned in the previous slide. With lessons learned with good documentation, we are able to share experience-based knowledge, which is why we're all here. Here are some of those experiences. This is a similar slide from my last presentation. It is pretty busy, but I want it to be available for reference, and I am hopeful to get feedback with similar input so that this list can grow. You'll have to take a read for yourself. Tricks of the trade continued. You'll have to take a read of this for yourself later. So remember, when calibrating, learn your equipment and keep it in good working order. Leave enough time for warm-up and setup. Take your time and set things up right. This is going to save you time in the actual calibration. Keep good notes for yourselves and others. And thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Hans Raimonik and I work as an auditor in the Quality Assurance section in the Monitoring and Laboratory Division at CARB. In my portion of this talk, I will focus on 2 important points. My goal is to explain how an audit differs from a calibration, and I want to share what some districts do to maximize their chances of passing an audit. Before I get started, here's a review of a few important points as they pertain to quality assurance audits. Through the probe means we audit the whole sample train. This means that the analyzer can be properly calibrated, but the audit can fail due to sample train issues such as scrubbing or leaks. Failures at audit levels 1 and 2 are currently not actionable. In the next 3 slides, I will show how leaks in the manifold to analyzer portion of the sample train are either exposed or masked depending on the manifold pressure. During normal operation, the manifold at an air monitoring station will have negative or subambient pressure. The manifold pressure will vary from station to station based on sample train configuration. Leaks at connection points and filter holders result in the analyzer sampling a combination of ambient and inside station air. If the air inside the station is representative of ambient air, then this leak might not be apparent in the data. During a carb quality assurance through the probe audit, the manifold at the air monitoring stations should still maintain a slightly negative or subambient pressure. This ensures that leaks can be detected. When Analyzer 2 passes an audit and Analyzer 1 fails significantly, this indicates a leak at one of two fittings, or the filter holder indicated by the green arrows. It should be noted that the leak can also be present at a filter holder inside the instrument. During nightly precision and spans, or during calibration, the manifold will have positive or above ambient pressure. This would also be the case if an audit were to be conducted through the manifold. Sample train leaks are not detected under these scenarios. Only analyzer issues are detected during nightly precisions and spans, during calibrations, or through the manifold audits. However, there are two ways that a station operator can test for leaks. You could push nightly precisions and spans through the probe, or could periodically plug the probe and pull vacuum and then measure speed at which the sample train returns to ambient, a leak decay test. If you are unable to pull vacuum, then you have a significant leak. The next several slides focus on a specific example where a NOx audit failed at 40% low while the ozone audit passed. A verification at the back of the instrument after the audit indicated that the NOx analyzer was not the issue. By deductive reasoning, we were looking at a leak in the portion of the sample train between the NOx analyzer and the manifold. In order to figure out when this leak might have begun, buddy site comparisons were plotted. The data resolution is hourly and provides greater detail and insight than if we were to use daily average data. The red oval is the period that CARB QA found to be questionable. The light green overlay indicates periods where data appears to correlate. On this slide, we look at April through August of 2019. This is the period before data becomes questionable. The buddy site comparison of two sites that are less than 10 miles apart indicates that both stations appear to show good correlation on an hourly resolution. Starting in early November of 2019, we start to notice intermittent periods where Station A is not picking up the daily NO2 variations as exhibited at Station B. Station A data appears buffered or diluted with respect to Station B. The most pronounced period is from late December 2019 into the start of January 2020, as indicated by the thick red circle. The two thinner red ovals indicate periods where Station A also appears buffered or diluted with respect to Station B. Here we zoom in on the period between the last calibration and the CARB QA audit. The intermittency of the leak is perplexing. The culprit turned out to be the internal filter holder on the NOx analyzer. This filter holder is disassembled and reassembled at each filter change. A leak check was not being performed after the filter change. The aha moment came when filter change dates were superimposed onto the graph. In the end, 3 invalidation periods were chosen. It is rare to invalidate data further back than a calibration. However, in this case, it proved to be necessary. Additionally, as a part of the AQDA resolution, the district performs a leak check after each filter change and keeps an eye on the hourly data comparisons with its buddy site. One of the best ways to maximize your chances of passing an audit is to conduct precisions and spans through the probe. During a nightly precision or span that is conducted through the probe, the manifold at an air monitoring station should still maintain a slightly negative or subambient pressure. This ensures that any leaks can be detected. It is the closest replication of a QA audit configuration and a station operator's best defense against failing a QA audit and receiving an AQDA. If you have not yet done so, please consider running nightly and precision span points through the probe. In addition to finding leaks, this configuration can help you diagnose a sample train that is becoming contaminated and is scrubbing your sample before it reaches the analyzer. Cleaning the sample train monthly goes a long ways towards ensuring that you will pass your audits. Stations that have already adopted these methods are passing our audits without issue. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, presenters. We are going to enter the Q&A discussion portion now. If you could please join me on screen. We do have one question currently up. Are calibrations being conducted through the probe inlet? It is discouraged because any adjustment of station analyzer during this cal may potentially mask leaks and or scavenging impacts due to the sample train.
How I do a probe in that?
Ranjit, could you specify who that was intended for?
Leah, this is Hansa. I think it's intended for Chris because he mentioned that they plan on doing this.
Okay, let's see. Our current calibrations are done through the Manifold. And what in actuality, our calibration standard is replacing our nightly QC environics. So basically it's mimicking its sample path. So now that we're incorporating our nightly QC to go through the whole sample train, then yeah, it will likely compensate for that as well.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone else have any questions? Please type it into the chat. We just have one reminder in the Q&A that the Standards Lab also works on audit equipment. I'll give people one question for Hansa. I see that you deliver the audit gas at slightly less than atmospheric pressure to leak check, as well as audit operations manuals for the instruments state that cal gas must be delivered at atmospheric pressure, and EPA documentation states that each method must be used in strict accordance with its operation manual. Although this is for calibration, shouldn't it also apply to audits as well? Shouldn't leak checks and gas audits be done separately?
Yeah, so we actually present with positive pressure at the inlet, but we try to make sure that the manifold still stays slightly subambient. We want to see a deflection from whatever the normal sampling negative pressure is in the manifold to slightly less than that, but we don't want to drive the manifold positive because there's two reasons why we do a through the probe audit. Is to check for scrubbing by the sample train and to check for leaks. And if we were to drive the manifold positive, as you do in a calibration, you would actually be taking away half the reason why we do a complicated through the probe audit. We do check for leaks that way and for scrubbing. So that's why we do it this way.
Thank you, Hansa. Sorry.
I have something to note. I'm curious as well on when they do run those audits. Hansa, how did you guys determine the leak? Is it just hands-on going through it, or do you guys run a leak check afterwards when you see a failure?
Oh well, in that particular case, the fact that two analyzers were pulling off the same manifold and the ozone passed spot on, and the NOx audit was coming in about 40% low, that infers that there's something that there's likely to be an issue. Oh, and one last thing, we did check the NOx analyzer at the back of the instrument. It passed spot on, so we knew it wasn't an analyzer issue. We knew that the ozone analyzer passed through the sample train spot on, and the fact that the NOx analyzer wasn't passing, it was and it was kind of a consistent 40% low across points. So that to me very quickly is a warning in training of some ambient air somewhere, and so that was the leak, and it turned out to be at the filter holder.
Okay.
But that was the fact that it was at the filter holder. We figured that out later through the whole AQDA resolution process and really going through all the documentation and trying to pinpoint it, because the intermittency was really weird, and it turned out every few weeks when they changed the filter, sometimes it didn't fit really well, and it was pulling inside station air or inside analyzer air.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you, Hansa. We have a few more questions in the chat. Hopefully we can get through them really quickly before we head into a shortened break. Any experience working with solenoids on precision checks using the T703U? It opens during PC and closes when done. Thanks.
T703U. We don't use a T703U for our nightly precision checks. We use an Environics. So we haven't. I believe he's probably referring to the ozone bleed, perhaps on the 703. And yeah, we don't currently use that. I've heard that there's an ozone bleed or a concentration of ozone as it does a pre-burn, perhaps, and can leak into your sample train, causing issues. I haven't experienced that because we don't use it currently. So someone else might have to field that one who has experience with that.
All right, thank you, Chris. We're going to go ahead and end the Q&A now and lead into a shortened 5-minute break, and we'll be back at 11:05 with the scheduled presentation.
Okay, and I can type some of the answers, and I see there's a few more, so I'll try to type some answers during the break.
All right, great. Thank you.